Powell will forever be remembered, as he has said, as the man who gave that presentation, and I, such as I am remembered, will be the person who put it together for him. I can tell you what I feel about that. It was the lowest point in my professional and personal life, and I wish I hadn't been involved in it. And I can tell you that we were lied to by the intelligence community, particularly by George Tenet and his deputy, John McLaughlin. There's no question in my mind now that we were lied to. We were not told about things that they knew about that would have probably influenced Secretary Powell, and I know damn well they influenced me to resignation. We were never told about them, not anything about curveball, about the fact that the aluminum tubes were disputed by a guy at the Department of Energy who didn't show up for George Tenet's consensus meeting on the issue. We were not told that Sheikh al-Libi, the source for the connection between al-Qaeda and Baghdad, was interrogated by the Egyptians with no one else present, and he was waterboarded, and that 7 days after he was waterboarded, he recanted everything he'd said. We were not told any of those things. Those are not excuses. They're just descriptions of the broken down nature of the political and the of the political process and the decision-making process in particular under the George W. Bush administration in the first years. We didn't. I don't think it's fair to say, though, that even if Colin Powell had stood up and said, because of his objections on timing and legitimacy, which he could have well done, I'm leaving this administration because I don't agree with you, Mr. President, I don't think that would have stopped anything. I think George W. Bush and Dick Cheney would have marched right on to war, and they would have taken the nation with them. So I disagree with this idea that if Colin Powell had stood up and said, I'm resigning over this issue, that it would have stopped anything. The juggernaut was moving. The vice president was pushing the juggernaut as much as the president, if not more, and we were going to war. And Colin Powell's resignation would have been forgotten in a week.
Well, yeah, and I didn't bring up his resignation, but really it's just this from a citizen's perspective, and that's all I really am. And it was just the sense of shock that I felt, being raised as a Republican, a military officer's son, that I could not trust, because when 9/11 happened, I called my dad and I said, Dad, what should we do? And that's what so many of us as Americans wanted to do. It was our instinct to look to our leaders and say, what do we do? And then the answer was to go and invade the wrong country and to cause all these unnecessary deaths and to waste all of this money and to eventually put our country in the situation that we found ourselves at the end of that administration, all made in this fateful time. And I don't know why it is Colin Powell and you, Colonel Wilkerson, are the ones that we've looked to, not because we wanted you to resign so much, it's just that in some ways it was a loss of innocence for a lot of us as citizens. And I think in many cases, those of us who decided to become more vocal and more active, it spurred from that moment, also from Hurricane Katrina, which ironically we've had a little reminder of both in the last few months as we make this really important decision on November 6th.
Let me just say that, I plead double indemnity, double guilt here, because I'd already been through this. You talk about not believing that your president could lie to you or not believing that the administration could lie to you. I went to war and fought for an administration that lied to the American people. I go every year without fail to that black wall down there in Washington and look at those 50,000-plus names on that wall, some of whom were my dear friends. Mm-hmm. And I think about my participation in that conflict under the false pretenses of Lyndon Baines Johnson and Richard Nixon, because both of those men lied to the American people, too. They lied from the Tonkin Gulf incident, which, of course, never happened, all the way up to the Paris peace talks. They lied to the American people. They waged a war that killed 50,000, 2.5 million Vietnamese, wounded horribly over 100,000 Americans. I mean, I've been through that before. So why I didn't recognize what was happening to us in 2003, I kicked myself in the butt every day for.